is the answer as simple as this.
I know that they were taunted. I know that the people were mean to him.
Were Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold driven to the edge by the taunts and teases of Columbine's athletes? Tonight, a first look at the now ravaged halls of Columbine and a hard look at life inside those halls.
The charge has been leveled that Columbine tolerates bad behavior by its top athletes. The stories of
Edie Magnus with Life and Death at Columbine.
Not just a local one, symptomatic of a variety of factors at play in popular culture. But the people of Littleton, Colorado have also been willing to look into their own backyards, in particular at the school culture at Columbine. Was there an environment that allowed an in-group, the athletes, to torment outcasts? And was that one of the factors that pushed Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold to the edge? Tonight, some of Columbine's athletes speak out to give their side of the story. And we get the latest on the most recent arrest in the case. Here's Edie Magnus.
Anything to say to the victim's family, Philip? You feel responsible at all?
Do you have any statements, Philip, whatsoever? How well do you know the shooting suspect?
Now, 2 months after the killings at Columbine, a long-rumored arrest. 22-year-old Philip Duran, charged with helping Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold buy the Tech-9, one of the guns used in the shooting.
Apparently he was, for lack of a better term, the middleman.
Authorities say Duran, a former Columbine student who worked with Harris and Klebold at Blackjack Pizza, put them in touch with Mark Manis, who sold them the gun for $500. The charges were filed just as the outside world was getting its first glimpse inside the halls where terror reigned for 3 hours last April 20th. The library where most of the students were attacked and where Klebold and Harris killed themselves, still wrapped in red tape, still sealed as a crime scene. The gaping wounds left on walls by that sudden, fearsome spray of gunfire, not yet smoothed away. Across from the library, Dylan Klebold's locker, searched and marked empty. Harris's, too. In the Commons, construction workers obliterating the destruction caused by bombs and bullets. Up and down the staircase where the trenchcoat-clad shooters raced after fleeing classmates, spitting out a hailstorm of hate, traces of the rampage are being wiped away. When school starts in August, the fire alarm will have a new sound, lest it trigger horrible memories of the last time it sounded. But while the broken glass, the stained carpeting, the splintered furniture can all be replaced, officials know that wiping out the memories and the questions will not be so easy.
He's going to kill us if we were of color and if we had a hat and if we were his blatant board.
Almost as soon as the shooting stopped, the soul-searching began. What could have caused this explosion at the heart of the Columbine community? What fury had fueled such a murderous rampage? The usual suspects, violent movies, violent video games, violent music, and easy-to-get guns have all attracted their share of the blame. But from the very beginning, a chorus of voices traced the boys' anger to the athletes at Columbine High.
They came in and they said, all the jocks stand up, we're going to kill every single one of you.
At first, I heard they were picking out certain people, like the jocks and stuff.
Teased and taunted at school, Eric and Dylan, authorities discovered, had been fixated on the school's jock elite for some time.
Their fantasy film was that all the athletes died, that they killed all the athletes.
And in the weeks that followed, there were reports that the cult of the athlete was so powerful at this high school that it ground up the severely alienated kids. Kids like Eric and Dylan.
There's a hierarchy in the school that the strong rule the weak and the athletes are at the top of the hierarchy. And that they taunted kids, and they taunted kids in front of teachers. They taunted kids in front of other kids. They did it very openly, and nobody tried to stop it.
Washington Post reporters Dale Rusikoff and Lorraine Adams interviewed more than 50 people in the Columbine community. They say parents and students repeated a disturbing theme. At Columbine, jocks rule, and they were told school officials look the other way, even from charges of physical intimidation and sexual harassment.
because the primary goal was to win games, win matches, and when an athlete got in trouble, they kind of smoothed it over.
Jonathan Pollack, whose daughter Jennifer is a sophomore at Columbine, agrees. He was one of the few people we spoke to willing to criticize the school on camera.
I think winning is everything. There's an emphasis on success at any cost.
And that cost was
the violence. I think that's a direct relationship to the emphasis on winning. And if you're not a winner, you're a loser.
It turns out the stories of a special status enjoyed by Columbine's athletes, which may have provoked the two young outcasts to an act of bloody revenge, don't sit too well with the students who play sports here. Now, for the first time, some athletes, their parents, and coaches are speaking out. They told Dateline they want to respond to the rumors and accusations to set the record straight.
I don't think it's right to pin it on anybody but them. They're the ones that went in there and did it.
And to say that, you know, really their whole rage began because of the jocks, you know, I think is insane.
We sat down with several current and former Columbine athletes, a parent and a basketball coach. They say players are not put on a pedestal at Columbine.
If anything, you know, they're held to a higher standard.
Athletes sign a contract, a good behavior code, and they say, star player or not, a violation takes you out of school and out of the game. Senior Mike Sheehan, who plays 3 sports, recalls an argument in school that suddenly escalated.
I was headbutted, and so I swung and punched them back. And that's it. They pulled us into the office. We sat down and talked to the dean, students, and I was suspended for 3 days.
Did you miss a game?
I had to miss all the practices, and there was no preferential treatment for me.
Coach Martin says winning at all costs is not the Columbine code.
I can tell you that our athletic director and our principal were almost the opposite. They want good people that are educators first, and I never felt that pressure from them.
In fact, Nick got pulled aside one time by Rudy because he wasn't getting a very good grade in one of his classes. And he was warned he needed to bring it up, which he did.
Or else what?
He would be benched. Nick was a 2-time All-State team player. He was Mr. Basketball his senior year. And Rudy would have thought nothing of benching him.
As to reports that jocks physically intimidated other students, singling out the 2 Columbine killers, as well as other members of the so-called trench coat mafia, these kids adamantly deny it. There was no rough stuff, they insist.
Talking about picking up a person and just throwing them. That never happened.
Just garden variety high school skirmishes, including a graffiti battle played out on the bathroom walls.
One person from Dillon and another group would go in and say, jocks suck. Well, somebody, an athlete or somebody would go in there and play and say something bad about them, like trench coat mafia is sus too or something.
A lot of people want us to think that there was a whole ton of athletes in the trench coat mafia and we were constantly at war with each other, but that was never happening. There was always maybe 1 or 2 people who gave him a hard time.
And if Harris and Klebold were really gunning just for big-time jocks, why, they wonder, did the pair strike in the library at lunchtime?
If they were going for jocks, I mean, if that was their prime target, they knew where the jocks were. The weight room. Why not go to the weight room? So you could get 30 or 40 people right there.
It turns out that many of the incidents of jocks bullying so-called outcasts have been attributed to a single athlete, Rocky Hofschneider, and his friends. Hofschneider, an all-state wrestling champion and football player, graduated in May of '98. He wasn't even there this year, but his reputation lingers. Peter Forsberg was an underclassman when, he says, Rocky and a small group of his buddies dominated Columbine's corridors.
He was sort of seen as, you know, the big, tough kid that everyone was scared of. You know, he sort of struck terror into the hearts of all students.
Peter also remembers Eric and Dylan being on the receiving end of abuse from lots of other kids this year.
These guys were called dirtbags a lot. Occasionally, they might have had something thrown at them in the cafeteria. I know that the people were mean to him.
In 1998, Hofschneider and 4 of his friends were arrested for burglarizing and ransacking an apartment. Friends later said the incident riled Eric and Dylan. They felt that once again, the school let the jocks, especially Rocky, off the hook. But Columbine principal Frank DeAngelis says they were wrong.
The student was suspended from school, and at that particular period of time, he was not involved in a particular activity.
So he didn't miss games because he wasn't playing games?
There were no games to be played.
That's because the incident took place in April, only weeks before graduation. Later, Rocky and 2 others pleaded guilty to felony charges and got suspended jail sentences and probation. Rocky also figures in another confrontation. A Jewish student accused him of physical abuse and anti-Semitic slurs during gym class, and the student's father says the school did nothing. School board spokesman Rick Kaufman.
The 2 students that verbally taunted that individual admitted it, were immediately suspended, received further disciplinary action through the Sheriff's Department. Community service was ordered for both of those individuals.
The school gave Dateline a copy of a letter from the Anti-Defamation League indicating the boys' parents felt Columbine had handled the situation satisfactorily. Hofschneider wouldn't talk to Dateline for this report, but in the past he has been quoted as saying he didn't know the killers and that he never escaped punishment for his misdeeds.
There is another report that a young girl at your school was being taunted about her big breasts by a star football player at a wrestling match, and that a coach essentially said to her, "Go move to the other side of the gym if you don't like it. It's your problem."
I spoke specifically to the coach, and he said that is completely inaccurate. He does not recall or was not approached by anyone which would have led him to say, "Go and sit on the other side of the building."
Not surprisingly, both DeAngelis and Kaufman take issue with how life at Columbine is being dissected in the aftermath of the killings.
And there's not a high school across this country that you could go and look at and do an in-depth report and would not find the same types of things.
And as for insinuations that DeAngelis, a former coach himself, is more willing to give errant jocks a break,
the charge has been leveled repeatedly that Columbine tolerates bad behavior by its top athletes because they're top athletes.
Well, let me share a story with you. My son was a wrestler, and a pretty good wrestler. And my wife and I went home one evening, and my son had violated the athletic trainer's contract that I had signed, in which my son had signed. He had been drinking. He was getting ready to go to the state tournament, and I turned him in.
While school officials deny ever turning a blind eye to the antics of their athletes, they say they'll be doing things differently next year. They'll have regular meetings with players and coaches. The subject? Tolerance of others. They're unhappy to have learned so much about student life and student strife too late.
It's hard for me to deal with it if I'm unaware of the problem. I'm hoping that we can open up lines of communication that students would feel comfortable going to adults or going to their parents to say, you know, this is occurring at Columbine High School.
The students we met with also feel that Columbine is much like any other high school. There are cliques and there is cruelty. But the memory of blood running in the corridors is spurring them to make sure that from now on, everyone will try to be just a little bit nicer.
We need to be careful not to tease and torment. Just try to be kind and reach out to the other kids.
Students will find many changes when Columbine reopens in August. The school is not just being repaired. Large parts of it are also being renovated. There will be new furniture, bold new designs on the floors, and new colors on the walls. The idea, says the architect, is to make sure students know the school is different. Eventually, there will be a memorial to those who died that day, but officials say it will not be at the
bare-chested testaments to team loyalty. On one frigid, sunny day, the community that's still healing from last April's shootings at Columbine High School that killed 13 people could gather, not to mourn, but the cheer. The Columbine Rebels were playing for the state football championship.
So much outreach and support from the community. I mean, everybody, I think they really feel like more of a family now.
The game was dedicated to number 70, Matt Kechter, a sophomore linebacker who was killed in the shootings. Players wore his number on their helmets. Matt's brother wore his jacket on the sidelines. The Rebels weren't supposed to win against heavily favored Cherry Creek, but somehow they pulled off the upset 21-14. The crowd and emotions could not be contained.
It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. I mean, everything we've been through, everything our whole school's gone through, and now to be here and to win this and bring us back to our school, I can't even describe it.
Matt will everybody will always carry in their heart, and obviously his presence was felt here today.
What we carry in our hearts, there's not words for it. And the pain and the sorrow that I still feel for the families.
We're just extremely proud of our whole Columbine community, and we love everybody. We're going to make it.
The community will savor this victory as long as it can. Next month, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department is due to release its report into its investigation into the shootings. Columbine Principal Frank D'Angelo says students and faculty are bracing themselves for the contents of the report and the inevitable publicity surrounding it. Now the Columbine community is content to shed tears once again. Only for the first time in 7 months, they are tears of joy.
Boy, these are champions. That's what life's all about. You got to just keep going forward.
Ed Garston, CNN, Englewood, Colorado.
Describing events leading up to their attack on Columbine High School. Until now, only a short transcript from those tapes has been made public. Time correspondent Timothy Roche is the first journalist to view the tapes. A rare and chilling glimpse into what Harris and Klebold were planning and why. Roche's account of what he's seen in tonight's dispatches.
The first tape is from March 15th, a little more than a month before their rampage. And it's a little after midnight. Eric and Dylan are sitting in the basement of Eric's house. His parents are asleep upstairs. They're sitting in a pair of Lazy Boy recliners talking about what they're going to do and how good it's going to feel. It's very much a dialogue between the two boys. And at one point, Dylan asked himself a question that other people probably would have asked him had they known the boys were planning this, and that is, aren't you afraid of going to jail? And Dylan says, you don't get it. We're not going to live through this. And it's a lot like watching some evil incarnate of Wayne's World. Here you have Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, who are Wayne and Garth, but are talking about blowing up their school and talking about how sweet revenge is going to be. And they're saying how much they know this is going to hurt their parents. But they're also talking about how good it's going to feel to blow someone's head off. We all thought that Dylan was the follower, that Eric was the leader. And as you look at the investigation and talk to the detectives on the task force, you discover that they were equal partners. And watching the videotapes, both of them seem very eager to do this. When one makes one statement, the other finishes the thought. As you watch these videotapes, you begin to wonder, are they schizophrenic? Are they insane? Are they high on drugs? You can't tell because some of the things they're talking about are so outrageous. And in fact, Eric was taking medication to help control his behavior. And in the months leading up to this, had stopped taking his medication. And he liked the way it felt for the medication to be out of his system. It allowed the anger to return, as he said. It allowed the rage to keep building. And he says, my anger's coming back, and I like it. In another part of the videotapes, he describes the anxious moments of waiting for the bombs to go off before they open fire on the school. And he gets very quiet, and he goes, tick, 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 bam. It's very scary to listen to him describe what's going to happen. And finally, there's a videotape that was recorded about a half hour before the rampage began. And it's very brief. It's not rambling like the other videotapes. It's each boy's attempt at a goodbye to their parents. And they talk at length, particularly Eric, about what this was going to do to his mother. And he seemed to be worrying about that because in nearly all of the videotapes, he would somehow direct the conversation back to his parents, talking about how sweet they were. And they tell their parents on these tapes that they should not blame themselves, that this is something that they're planning on their own and you could not have a clue that it was coming. As Eric and Dylan are talking about their parents, and Eric is showing some of his remorse for his mother, he apologizes repeatedly, and he says on the videotapes, like Shakespeare says, good wombs hath borne bad sons. On April 20th, the day this happened, Eric Harris had quoted Shakespeare yet again. Good wombs hath borne bad sons.
Preventing tragedies such as Columbine may seem like a monumental and complicated task, but the answer could be as simple as a smile. That story, when
A hail of gunfire in the school cafeteria. We want to warn you, the surveillance video is graphic. You can see students huddled and diving for cover, using their chairs for protection as gunfire flies around. You can see explosions and fire in the school cafeteria, and then the chaos as students run away from the killers. The killers in that rampage, 18-year-old Eric Harris and 17-year-old Dylan Klebold, also made secret videotapes detailing the attack on their fellow students. Time magazine was allowed to view 5 of those tapes, and according to the magazine, the tapes are filled with anger and apologies. Klebold was quoted as saying, "I hope we kill all 250 of you." Well, Klebold and Harris also seem to apologize to their parents. Harris says, quote, "They're going to be put through hell once we do this. There's nothing you guys couldn't do about this." They even speculate on Hollywood making a movie about the tragedy. Officials now say they will make the tapes available for the
videotapes the two made before the Columbine shooting. Authorities decided to let the parents view them after Time magazine published a story on the videotapes. One parent said images of the 2 boys running through the cafeteria with their guns and their hate-filled words did not help answer the question of why, but only opened old wounds. Getting to work.
As teenagers Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold detailed their plan to kill hundreds of people in the school attack last April. Time magazine reported the details of the videos this week, angering the families of the victims who say they should have been allowed to see them first. Among those upset is Brian Warbaugh, whose son Danny was killed in the shooting. Mr. Warbaugh, good morning to you.
Good morning, Katie.
What was your reaction when you heard or got the news that Time magazine, a reporter from Time that is, was permitted to view these videos?
I was angry. We've been requesting to see the various videotapes for probably over 6 months, and we've been denied access to them. And then we find out that they've shown them in detail to Time magazine, as well as, we learned yesterday, a bunch of additional crime scene evidence.
Now, what was the reaction when you had requested in the past to view these videos? What did Jefferson County officials tell you all?
Well, some of the people said they'd look into it, and they never got back with us. Some of them told us that it's an ongoing investigation, and it's still evidence, so they can't show it to us yet.
Did you... I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so we've been approaching it from the point of view that it's an ongoing investigation, and we'll get to see them someday. And now we find out that, you know, it was okay for Time to see them, but not for the victims' families.
Now, did you make a call or go visit anyone from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department or DA's office after you learned the news?
Yes. Yesterday we went and talked to both the district attorney and the sheriff. And the district attorney had promised us before the sentencing of Mark Manis that they would do everything in their power to keep these from being released. And then yesterday they told us, well, you know, sorry, but we didn't have any authority to do that. We're not in possession of them.
Remind people who Mark Manis is. Is he the one who sold the gun?
Yes, he is. And then as far as the sheriff goes, he says he takes responsibility and apologized for it, but he said Time magazine was only supposed to use it for background information, which again, that's an amazing statement to the families, or at least my family, because we've requested to see them, and yet
they thought it was appropriate to use it for background information.
And we should note that a Times spokesperson denied that that the magazine had been instructed to use the videos for background only. Why is it so important for you, Mr. Rohrbaugh, to take a look at these tapes?
Well, we still don't have the information of what happened to my son. You know, we have kind of a vague picture of what happened. We haven't seen a full overview of all the things that happened before April 20th, during, and after. And we feel as a family of a victim, you know, we have more rights to see this before the media sees it.
Have you learned anything from what you've been able to read about the tapes? Because I know families were afforded the opportunity to view portions of the tape yesterday, and you decided not to. Let me ask you, first of all, why did you decide not to look at the videos?
Because what we requested from the sheriff was to have the same access that Time had, to be able to rewind the tape, to be able to make transcripts, to see all the tapes. We were told that there's approximately 40 hours of tapes, these 3 tapes plus a bunch of additional tapes that were taken from the school. And so we've asked to see those, and they have told us they will now let us see all of them in their entirety. But of course, we couldn't do that yesterday.
Have you learned anything from what you've read, Mr. Rohrbaugh? And I'm sure you've read extensively about some of the things that Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris said on these tapes. Has any of that been helpful, or has it simply been disturbing?
Well, I don't know that it's been helpful, but it brings up some new questions. You know, they kind of went into detail about all the different times they could have been caught, and they talk about, you know, Mr. Harris confiscating pipe bombs from them. And so I think that's very telling about the Harris family. And so more questions, I guess, were brought up than were answered.
And in terms of the release of the tapes, do you and the other families have any recourse at all?
No, I don't think we do. I think at this point, you know, obviously they're out, and certainly the rest of the media, you know, was entitled to look at them. I'm still puzzled why they decided Time should have an exclusive on them if they were going to release them at all. But at this point, I don't think there's any recourse.
Brian Rohrbaugh. Mr. Rohrbaugh, thanks very much for talking with us.
Thank you.
It's 7:07.
The questions they raise. Even though the surveillance tapes are silent, you can almost hear the carnage. And 8 months after the Littleton massacre, we now know the shooters planned the attack over a year in advance. Yesterday, along with these high school surveillance tapes, police also showed reporters, but did not release to the public, home videos made by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold a month before the shooting spree. On those home videos, Klebold tells about the time his parents walked in on him in his room trying on a black leather trench coat with a sawed-off shotgun hidden underneath. They didn't even know it was there, he said. And Harris knew what their parents would ask themselves after the killing. If only we had searched their room, Harris said. If only we had asked the right questions. Having viewed the tapes for the first time, parents of the victims are asking questions now.
I find it very surprising that they were able to amass such a huge quantity of weaponry without anyone knowing.
Both boys were very, very angry. Again, on the home videos, Klebold says, "I'm going to kill you all. You've been giving us expletive for years." And on Harris's AOL website in 1998, he said, "All I want to do is kill and injure as many of you as I can." Could all of this hatred and all of this planning, which ended in the deaths of 12 students and a teacher, could all of this have gone unnoticed by the Klebold and Harris parents? What do you think about...
Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris are in the library next door, killing students. Graphic details today why the 2 angry teenagers wanted a massacre at Columbine High. Much worse than the 12 students and teacher they did kill. Klebold said, "I hope we kill 250 of you." That chilling quote made a month before the April 20th shooting spree. The 2 boys made 3 home videos. Reporters saw them today, but police would not allow us to show you. In another tape made the morning of the shooting a 1-minute-long goodbye message. Klebold, "I didn't like life very much." Harris, who often pointed a shotgun at the camera, "I know my mom and dad will be in shock and disbelief." But Klebold declares, "It's what we had to do." The county sheriff first showed the home video to Time magazine, then decided others should see it too. In all the tapes, Klebold and Harris always appear angry, bent on revenge. Against whom? Blacks, Jews, Asians, athletes, and whites. Klebold declaring, "You're going to pay for blanking us." Not a sentence was spoken without a profanity. Harris proclaimed, "We aren't afraid either. We're going to blank die doing it."
The two boys clearly wanted to become famous for Judgment Day, as they called it. They thought there'd be a movie made. But instead of becoming martyrs, the police say today's release shows how disturbed the two boys were. It also shows how much pain they still cause in this community. The last words on the tape from Harris, calmly, "That's it. Sorry. Goodbye."
Let's go back now to April 20th, 1999, and first word of the tragedy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's happened again. There's been a shooting at a school in America, this time in Littleton, Colorado, which is just southwest of Denver. It's one of the fastest-growing suburbs in America. At Columbine High School, there have been a number of reports that two gunmen, apparently wearing black trench coats and maybe ski masks, came in armed with weapons and what appeared to be either hand grenades or pipe bombs. One of the reporters at the scene from our station there in Denver, KUSA, has counted 8 shooting victims so far.
The news from Colorado kept getting worse. Incomprehensible reports of high-powered weapons and bombs of two teenage boys on a rampage, laughing as they murdered their fellow students. Disbelief gave way to fear. Fear gave way to anger and grief.
Across Jefferson County today, the next step, gathering to mourn, to begin the healing. At the Light of the World Catholic Church, Pastor Jerry Rohr speaks to more than 800.
We will all agonize in the coming weeks over what could have prevented today's tragedy. The answer may never be clear.
At Clement Park, across from the school, students gather at a car belonging to one of their dead classmates. And television played and replayed the words of 14-year-old Katie Crona, words she wrote her parents at school during the siege.
Sitting in this classroom is pure agony. If you have heard any of the news, I am sure that you are terrified. All I wanted to do when I heard the gunshots was call you and tell you how much I loved you both with all my heart. Well, the shooting has stopped for about 30 minutes, but the fear is still in me and all through the classroom. I said a prayer for both of you, hoping that Jesus would let you know that I was all right. I love you both so much, and I pray that every time I tell you that, it will grow in meaning. I love you both, Katie.
To hear that letter, Mrs. Crona.
I just don't think you can even begin to understand hearing a letter like that was written by your 14-year-old who thought that death was imminent.
For the Cronas and others, the bad dream ended with a reunion of parent and child. Other families found no such comfort. Here's Dateline's Keith Morrison.
All week they have come by thousands to the park near the school, and without really starting that way, have made it a shrine. A quiet place filled with messages and flowers and pieces of childhood, companions of early dreams. Somebody brought a soccer ball with Stephen Curno's name on it. He was just 14, a kid who loved airplanes and Star Wars. And then there is Rachel Scott, whose little car is now a memorial to lost dreams. She was going to be an actress. Yesterday, before her funeral, they let her friends put messages on her casket. And there was Daniel Mauser, whose straight A's were not enough for him. He was shy, so he joined the debate team. I think that's what I admired so much, his father said. Dreams. Isaiah Scholes wanted to be in the music business like his father. Moved to Columbine High so he could have the best shot at it.
He wanted to be in music. Music was his life.
And people come and stand near the basketball put here for the coach who put his body between the shooters and their victims. That's how Dave Sanders became a victim, too, after 25 years building the dreams of others.
He took a lot of extra time to get a lot of kids in college, just trying to get kids to go somewhere, you know, to make it.
Which Matt Kechter was all set to do with his A average and his football prowess and his humor. There was 17-year-old Corey DePuter, who would have been a Marine before long. And Lauren Townsend, 18 and on her way to study wildlife biology at Colorado State. This Friday, a letter arrived that said she'd won a scholarship there. And 16-year-old Kelly Fleming, the shy poet who wanted so much to write. and Kyle Velasquez.
He loved to play kickball across the street. He liked to pitch. He had such a crush on me.
Not far from the school, just where he parked it, is the rusty old truck John Tomlin cherished, the one he was always fixing up, now fixed up with flowers. 15-year-old Danny Rohrbaugh died on the sidewalk outside the school, his body laid out just like he was sleeping. He could have done so much, said Brian, his father. Still,
we were blessed with 15 years with him. How anyone could ask for more, I don't know.
grief comes in stages. This week, parents have had to be in impossible places, do dreadful things. Here's what it was to be Cassie Bernal's mother, Misty.
You just say you're in denial until you actually see their feet and know that those are your daughter's feet.
Cassie was religious too, was the girl the killers taunted when they asked, "Do you believe in God?" Cassie said yes, and died.
I hope that maybe someday I'll be able to wake up in the morning and not cry, not find myself crying.
Give your kids an extra hug. And just remember how precious they are to you and never take them for granted, because you just never know when God's going to decide he has a different plan for them.
When we come back, memories of Coach David Sanders by his wife, Linda, of Isaiah Scholes by his father, Michael, and of Rachel Scott by her brother, Craig.
I love her. I love her.
Beyond the flowers, the vigils, the grief, and the tears was a man who knew the importance of life. So much so that he was willing to risk his own.
Just the fact that he was concerned about the students and he got shot trying to, save other people.
David Sanders was 42, not just a teacher, but a basketball coach too, one who was very much adored.
I love him to death. I love that man.
But Tuesday, something happened that Cammie Held never dreamed.
It was like a movie, like a horror movie. Running by dead bodies. I never thought that would happen.
She found herself trapped in a science room with Sanders for 3 hours after he'd been shot twice in the chest.
He was just saying, he's like, I can't make it, let me go. And then you could, he was coughing and stuff. The only thing that I wanted to happen when I was in that room is for somebody to come get him. That's the only thing I was concerned about.
David Sanders died, but he will never be forgotten. His death saved so many lives and has inspired so many more.
Before he died, students held open Dave Sanders' wallet so he could see pictures of his wife and daughters. "Tell my girls I love them," he said. Angie Sanders is one of his daughters. Angie, good morning.
Hello.
You know, we've heard so many things, so many wonderful things about your dad. Tell me a little bit about him.
He always put other people before himself, always. He was always there, the first one there to help any way he could. He would do what he had to do to take care of it, and he was amazing. I just don't think I could live without David. And I love him so much.
Coach Dave Sanders, who, even after being shot, saved the lives of so many, was praised by students.
I wanted to thank him that he saved my life, and so Mr. Sanders, I thank you very much.
And fellow teachers.
I truly think that Dave his spirit truly is the spirit of Columbine.
In his last moments, as he lay fatally injured, the students he had saved showed him pictures of his family. His daughter remembered him today.
The girls and I would like you to know that we love you too, and because of you, there are a lot more kids that will make it. I love you.
All over Littleton, people gathered to remember those who had been lost. 15-year-old Daniel Rohrbaugh, 18-year-old Lauren Townsend.
I just want to say, Lauren, I love you. And you are the best little sister in the whole world.
And at the West Bowles Community Church, they remembered 17-year-old Cassie Bernal with a video tribute. A devoted Christian, Cassie hoped to become a missionary. Her last act, an expression of faith, reportedly asked by the killer just before he shot her, "Do you still believe in God?"
It's a revolution.
You could hear like bombs and shotguns going off, and then he came into the library and shot everybody around me, then put a gun to my head and asked if we all wanted to die, and he's gonna kill us if we were of color, and if we had a hat, and if we were his police force. I just started screaming and crying and telling him not to shoot me. And so he shot the girl, and he shot her in the head in front of me. And he shot the black kid because he was black. And he shot him in the face.
They were sort of laughing and carrying on throughout this whole thing.
Yeah, they were acting as if it was like a party, as if it, you know, it was like some cool thing to do, like it was like some video that they had and about how that it was just some great thing to witness, and after shooting people, they'd look at like how they shot them at close range and what they did and what they saw and how deep it went, and you know what damage that they'd done to them, and they laughed about it.
They said something particularly callous after they shot Isaiah Scholes. Tell me what they said.
Well, after they approached me, I started screaming, "Don't shoot me," and they said, "Fine." They're like, "Well, then we're just going to kill everyone around you." They're like, "That sounds like a great idea because everyone's going to die." And then they walked up like halfway to the middle of the desk, and they said that, "Oh, look, it's a nigger," and they're like, began to walk up close, and Isaiah was screaming, "No." He's like, "Come on, man, please don't." He's just like, "You don't know what you're doing. I want to go home. I want to see my mom." He's just like, "Please don't." And then they shot him at close range with a shotgun, and they're like, Eric was like, "Dylan, man, look at his brains. Isn't that awesome how it just splatters across the desk?" He's just like, "Let's go see if we could do it to somebody else."
He had 2 strikes against him. And this is the way I heard it. He was black, and he was an athlete. That's why my son died.
You pulled Isaiah under, you said, "Come on, get down."
Yeah, I saw Isaiah, and Isaiah, I really liked Isaiah. The first time I met him, he always made me laugh. Everybody that knew Isaiah, he was really, he'd always tell stories, and he was just a fun kid to be around, and I wish I could give him a hug today so bad. I saw him, I said, "Hey, Isaiah," and he came under the table and he said, "What's up?" And he sat between me and Matt, and that's when 2 tall kids with trench coats on, they came into the library, and they were shooting off their guns at people, and they came in and they were harassing students before they shot them.
They were saying racial slurs to Isaiah.
Yeah, they said, "Get any effing jock." They said, "Get anybody with a white hat on," because that's a lot of jocks wear white hats, and they
baseball cap.
Right, I was wearing a white hat, and I threw it under my shirt. And Isaiah did kind of look. He was a buff little kid, and he looked like a jock. He was well built, and they walked by and they saw Isaiah, and one of them said to the other one, they said "There's a N-word over here," and the other kid came over and saw him, and Isaiah tried to back up. Isaiah didn't say anything, and they shot Isaiah, and then they shot my friend Matt also.
And then you played dead, Craig.
Yeah, I just ended up laying on the floor. I was praying to God to give me courage and to keep protection over us, and he told me to He told me to get out of there. He told me, God told me to get out of there.
Mr. Scholes, for you, the last 24 hours plus, I know have been unbearable for you and your family.
It's been really agonizing.
Waiting to know.
Yeah, waiting to see what was going on, you know. And I'm in a situation now, man, I'm really hurting inside because, you know, I want to be in denial, but I know he wouldn't want this. He wouldn't want me to be this. He wants me to tell him what happened, you know what I'm saying? He wants me to speak out because I know his heart. My son, he was a very, very outgoing person, and, you know, he had no enemies. If you hated my son, you had a problem because he had no enemies, you know what I'm saying? He could get along with anyone because I train all of my children that way. All of my children. We are a very tight-knitted family, you know. I love my children more than life itself, and I hope the parents out there can feel where I'm coming from because, you know, our kids is our future. That's all we have. And for, you know, we need to watch and take care of that. You know, we need to watch and take care of our children. And for those parents that's not watching their children, that's not spending time with the family, that is our demise. You understand what I'm saying? That's our demise. And we, us as a human, need to stop it. We need to stop it. You know, man.
More of that interview in just a moment, as Craig Scott talks about the loss of two friends and of his sister, Rachel. That and more from Littleton when time and again. Did we show our true selves? The shooting at Columbine High put the people of Littleton to the test. The glare of national attention caught them at their most vulnerable. Watching on television, you might have asked yourself, how would I have handled that? Would I have had the strength of character shown by people like Craig Scott, who at age 16 saw his friends killed and lost a sister?
They were shooting kids, and they would harass them before they shot them. They would ask them questions, and
like what?
They would ask them if they believed in God. One girl, I heard them ask her if she believed in God, and she was begging, and they asked her again, do you believe in God? And she said yes, and they shot her.
As we watch Craig tell his story, slowly, haltingly, it was like a tape recorder was playing back behind his eyes.
I looked up and I saw my friend Matt, and he was smoking from his side. They'd shot him. He was a good kid.
And while the siege continued, and Craig worried about the whereabouts of his sister, Rachel, one of the gunmen turned his way.
It sounded like a rifle going off a shotgun or something right next to my ear, and I tried to sit still, and I was just praying. And I got up, and everybody was in shock, and I told everybody, let's get out of here, let's run out of here. And they all got up, and some girl asked me to help her. Her arm was, she had a chunk of her shoulder was blown off by a shotgun.
Then what happened?
Everybody was really shocked. I was talking to the cop, telling them what the suspects looked like and where they were at in the school. And after I told the cops that, I led some people in prayer, and I asked them if they had any brothers or sisters in the school, and they said yeah. And I said, I'm gonna pray for your brother or sister. We helped people get in the cop cars and the ambulances, and me and 3 other people were the last ones to leave with the cop. And all these people that I was praying for, 30 minutes later, their brothers and sisters were the day where other brothers and sisters were showing up.
But not your sister.
I said, see, I told you prayer worked. I told you your sister was going to come out of this. I said, and they thanked me, and they kept praying for my sister, and I kept praying for my sister and other people in that school. And something told me that something wasn't right with Rachel before we heard anything about it. I knew something wasn't right.
And when did you find out about your sister?
I found out the next morning. It was confirmed that she was dead. I kind of accepted it beforehand that she was. My sister was a real person. She was real to people, and she had no enemies at the school.
Somebody's sister, somebody's friend.
Remembering Rachel, her friends gathered around her coffin this afternoon and signed their names before she was laid to rest.
Questions coming through.
Rachel Scott was an aspiring actress who referred to herself jokingly as the People's Princess. A bright girl of 17, she hoped to graduate from high school early.
I hereby present unto you your graduation certificate to heaven.
Lori Johnson is a youth pastor in Rachel's church.
She's an amazing girl.
And as one of her favorite tunes, the theme from Titanic, played in the background, her prom date, Nick Baumgarten, spoke of Rachel.
She wanted to make everybody happy.
One of the pastors issued a challenge to students.
Pick up the torch that Rachel carried. Pick it up and hold it high. And stop being a victim. Be proactive. You have the power.
A crowd estimated by police at more than 70,000 gathered under intermittently rainy skies at a shopping center parking lot for the memorial service. As doves flew into the rainy skies, Colorado Governor Bill Owens read the names of the 12 students and the one teacher who were killed in Tuesday's assault.
God grant them eternal peace.
They spoke one by one.
We take comfort from each other and remind ourselves that the human spirit has great strength.
A vice president.
To the families of all those who died here, I say you are not alone. The heart of America aches with yours.
A student body president. Instead of a graduation speech, a eulogy.
We cannot let their lives be lost in vain. We must move forward, remembering the nobility.
This is not what you're supposed to go through as a senior in high school when you're about to graduate.
It's like somebody coming into your home. That's how close we were. And having a family member do this to your family, that's kind of what it was like.
But on this day, this community is determined to come together after being forced to say goodbye to so many no one could afford to lose.
We know life is short, that it can be perilous, but no community expects its high school to become a killing field. No parent expects to have to bury a child. The pain of Littleton was so great, it could be felt across the country.
If the human heart had a sound for grief, it would be like the solemn bells that tolled across Littleton and Denver today. 15 times for 15 dead. Echoing in the foothills at 11:21 a.m., 1 week to the minute since the sound of murderous gunfire here. The bells were a call for reflection, but few people needed the reminder. Not on another day of full-throated grief. Funerals, floral tributes that arrived by the hour at the park adjoining Columbine High.
I just remember praying and just thinking, my God, they're wiping out the entire school, you know.
Columbine varsity football coach Andy Lowry is mourning all those lost and thinking especially today of 16-year-old Matthew Kechter, a promising lineman and all-around great kid. Matthew was buried today. His teammates bore his casket from the church. And there were services for 2 other murdered students today. Corey DePuter, 17 years old. He wanted to be a Marine.
Please know, Corey, that you will be both sadly missed by all that knew you and revered for eternity.
Kyle Velasquez, 15. He was a quiet boy, loved to play kickball.
He didn't recognize rejection because all Kyle ever wanted was acceptance. He gave it so generously to others, he never understood that acceptance would be denied.
Here in Colorado, there was another funeral today. A closed service for Stephen Kernow, the little boy who grew up loving to play soccer and could recite the dialogue from Star Wars movies word for word. He wanted to be a Navy pilot, but he died at the age of just 14. And in Wisconsin, there was a funeral for 16-year-old John Tomlin, whose family moved to Littleton 4 years ago. He paid for his pickup truck with money earned at an after-school job. He helped build homes for poor families in Mexico. Church was an important part of John's life, and it was there today that friends and families celebrated a life all too short, but well-lived. John's beloved four-wheel drive truck is still in the high school parking lot, now a makeshift memorial. As are the rows of crosses on a hilltop overlooking the school. This community has set 2 crosses for the killers. Graffiti on them, both forgiving and laced with the anger and bewilderment about it all.
Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold killed 13 people and injured 23 before killing themselves. But their victims also included their own families, devastated by the massacre. What had gone wrong inside these comfortable middle-class homes? Judy Brown, a friend of the Klebolds, was with them the day of the shooting. She spoke to NBC's Dan Abrams.
Did you get the sense that the family suspected that their son was actually involved in the attack?
Did not. The dad was pacing back and forth saying, this is ridiculous. My son's not like this. He's not violent. This is not my son. He was insistent on that. And Sue was saying it can't be either.
Hours went by with no word from Dylan. Just reports there was a second gunman.
Now, the 2 gunmen, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold.
I said, let's make a call to my husband. He's watching TV. The TV's going to hear before the detective. And I called, and my son answered, and he said, Mom, it's Dylan. And I said, Brooks, now what are you saying? Or are they just saying it? And he said, no, Mom, they've printed his name on the TV. It's Dylan. So everybody's watching me, even the detective, and I said, it's Dylan, Sue. It's Dylan.
What did she do?
She sat there. We didn't know what to do. Everyone was quiet. We didn't know what to do. We'd never seen this side of Dylan. She was just terrified. She was scared. We were crying.
Was Dylan's mom willing to accept this? Was it possible?
We couldn't understand it was possible, but certainly the connection of the 2 knowing each other made it possible. And she's saying, I'm going to have to accept there's a side of my son I don't know, that I haven't ever seen. How am I going to accept this? Where did I go wrong? What did I do? How could I miss it?
What do they see for their future?
They don't see much of a future. They're trying to figure it out. Where do we go from here? What do we do? Who will like us? And they're kind people. Who will like us? And they did the best they could. The Klebolds are ready to stand up and say this was our son. And they are sorry it happened. So sorry it happened.
Can murder be forgiven? Rachel Scott was one of the students killed at Columbine. 8 days after the shootings, Rachel's parents and stepfather came to visit the memorial to the victims and speak with Katie Couric on Today.
You all this morning have a message about forgiveness. You're not angry at the parents of Dylan Klebold or Eric Harris.
There's a difference between anger and forgiveness. And we also see a difference between pardon and forgiveness. There's judicial things that have to be done. Quite honestly, if I had been there, I wouldn't hesitate to shoot people or kill people that were going to harm my daughter or other children. But forgiveness is really an issue of the heart. And there's a lot of issues that are going to come out of this. There's political issues, there's legislative issues, educational issues, but none of those really are going to touch the deep issues of the heart. And we just see a need. There are families hurting as bad or worse than we are that don't have the comfort of the families of the victims. And so we see a need for forgiveness through all this. It doesn't mean that there's not responsibility to be lived up to. It doesn't mean that there's not penalties to be paid, but it does mean that from the heart we can forgive.
Rachel Scott's father, Darrell. The previous week, the Today Show audience had gotten to know another member of the Scott family, son Craig, in an emotional joint interview with Michael Scholes. Scholes' son Isaiah was among the dead at Columbine. His funeral was to be the last held.
Thousands showed up for the funeral of 18-year-old Isaiah, who was shot as he took cover in the library. Shot after the gunman called him the N-word. Isaiah was supposed to graduate from Columbine next month. Today he was dressed in his cap and gown. After family and friends viewed him one last time, his parents helped close the casket.
Most Americans are saddened by what happened at Columbine.
This was also an occasion for the community to come together once again, a community still trying to understand.
Cassie, Stephen, Corey, Daniel, Dan, Kelly, Matthew, Rachel, John, Lauren, Kyle, Isaiah, and Mr. Sanders should be at Columbine in class, contemplating the graduation and their future.
Isaiah, I will miss your smiling face, and I will truly miss you saying, "Hey, Mr. D," as I walk down the hall.
America has been having a conversation with itself ever since the massacre in Littleton. What could possibly have led to such violence, people ask? Was it the violence in movies and on television, the violence on the internet, in rock lyrics, in video games? The questions themselves are revealing. Violence is everywhere in popular culture. It has become a form of entertainment. How surprised should we be when the real thing turns up in school? I'm Jane Pauley. We'll leave you on this episode of Time and Again with images from Columbine High School, where on April 20th, 1999, the violence was real enough to end 15 lives.
Sounded like fireworks, like pow, pow.
Okay, I'm with the SWAT team. We need paramedics right now. Emergency code 10 by the rear of the school where the pumper number 11 is.
We have that report for shots fired and explosions there.
Let's go right now.
There's two seniors and they had guns and they were just shooting. All you hear is like firecrackers, and then I looked out the window and there's a kid with a trench coat and a shotgun throwing pipe bombs in the parking lot, and then he shot a girl outside. They were like, these kids have guns, these kids have guns. They came down and they were just like, get everyone down. And then he came into the cafeteria and you could hear like bombs and shotguns going off. To the library, they just started shooting at everyone in the library. And then he came into the library, shot everybody around me. First they went to the far end and then they went close to where I was sitting. Everyone at my table was shot. Everyone at my table was shot. Then put a gun to my head and asked if we all wanted to die, and he's gonna kill us if we were of color, and if we had a hat, and if we
lost, but now I'm found, lost, blind, but now I see. When we've been there since thousands years, bright shining as the sun, we've now left days to sing God's praise. Then when we first begun.
Columbine High School shooting victim has played a previously unreleased audio portion of the videotapes the shooters used to plan their attack. Darrell Scott and other victims' families spoke with the media yesterday. Scott says he had asked Jefferson County Sheriff John Stone for all information and all evidence involving his daughter Rachel. He says he was shocked later to hear Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold threaten his daughter in the tape.
Two girls sitting next to you, they probably want you to shut the up too. He's gonna Rachel and January. So, Rachel and Jim, you're stuck up little Christianity, godly little. Hey, look, Jesus, what would you do? What would I do? I would shoot you in the head. Don't bully, let God be crucified.
Scott joined at least 3 other parents of shooting victims calling for the sheriff's resignation. They're upset over his decision to allow Time magazine reporters to view the Harris and Klebold videotapes in their entirety.
To the media and to the public. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I can. It's not the parents, it's one parent. That's me. And the reason I've released this is because it's inevitable now that the world's going to hear what's on the videotapes. And I would rather that someone who loves my daughter and who knew her be the person to reveal what was there about her, rather than waiting for it to blindside us again, like happened a few days ago.
So you feel it's out of your control because sooner or later someone will release these tapes, and although you would rather have them kept private, you figure you'd be the person to release them.
Absolutely.
I want to play a portion of the tapes, and we saw a portion a second ago, and again remind the viewers that this is graphic, the language is extremely offensive, and then get your reaction on the other side.
Two girls sitting next to you, they probably want you to shut the too. He's gonna Rachel and January. So, you're stuck up little Christianity, godly little whores.
When those two young men refer to Rachel and Jen, Rachel is your daughter they're talking about. Can you describe your reaction when you first heard that on the videotape?
Well, I was outraged that we weren't given the courtesy to know that my daughter was mentioned, first of all, by the Sheriff's Department.
What did the Sheriff's Department tell you?
They never told us anything. I had asked repeatedly for all the information I could get about my daughter and was told that I would be given that. And then to be called by the Rocky Mountain News and told that they had heard my daughter mentioned at least twice. And no, there's no doubt in my mind as to who they're talking about, because Rachel's prom date was mentioned, as well as the fact that she was a Christian, and she had classes with Eric and Dylan.
Did it change your perception of what happened in the school that day in terms of whether this was a deliberate search for your daughter?
I had some interesting things happen, and I'm not a mystical person, but at Rachel's funeral, there was an old man who was in the room with the families, and I don't know who he was. I asked around afterwards, but he came up to me specifically and my fiance and said they were after her. And I asked around, and no one knew who the guy was, and he disappeared. I don't know if he was an angel or what, but looking back on that months later, it really puzzled me. But I talked last night to one of the other victims who saw Rachel shot, and his very words were they were after her. He said both the boys came up to her and shot her repeatedly.
You know, it's my understanding that the Sheriff's Department also did not tell you that there were references to religion on those tapes, and I want to play another portion and talk about that. What would Jesus do when they refer to that? In your opinion, what are they referring to?
There's wrist bracelets that a lot of athletes wear and a lot of students wear that say, "What would Jesus do?" or WWJD. And that's what they were referring to.
And Rachel wore?
Yes, Rachel wore one.
Bracelets?
Absolutely.
You've called for the resignation of Sheriff John Stone of Jefferson County. Is there anything that the sheriff or the Sheriff's Department could do now to help restore your confidence in them?
No, I think it's beyond that. I would have a lot of admiration for him if he would choose to step down. And I'm not on a personal agenda to attack him. I simply think that he's blocked his job a number of times. The families were told repeatedly that we would be the first to be given information, and we weren't. I was told specifically, because I've been speaking around the country to large groups of young people, that this was not a God thing or a Christian thing. So I don't trust what I'm told. At first I did. I trusted the Sheriff's Department. I trusted everybody that told me things. And then when things didn't pan out, my trust disappeared.
You said that you're not a particularly mystical person, but your daughter wrote in some diaries for several years prior to her death, and prophesized, actually, about her own death, that she would not be around to be married, that she wouldn't live that long, but that God had a purpose for her. You've got one of her diaries.
You know, one of the things I think is so sad is that we can remember the names of murderers all the way back to Richard Speck, and we don't remember the names of victims. And I think that's a tragedy. One of the things that I want to do is build a memorial in Littleton, not just to that tragedy, but to the victims of tragedies throughout American history. And there's a lot of inspiration that has come out of the victims themselves. And my daughter left a stack of diaries with us, and in this particular diary, it was in her backpack. The day she was killed, there's a bullet hole through the back portion of it, and it says, "I won't be labeled as average." This was her own writing on the cover. One of the things she wrote was, "When will the world open and see the art in me? I write not for the sake of glory, not for the sake of fame, not for the sake of success, but for the sake of my soul, Rachel Joy Scott." And I don't want the world to remember these two boys. In fact, if they remember them as Killer 1 and Killer 2, that's okay with me. But I do want them to remember Rachel Joy Scott. I do want them to remember Corey DeTutor and Kelly Fleming and Isaiah Scholes and the rest of these victims, because these kids and this teacher had a lot to say and a lot to give.
If Rachel felt that she was not going to live to be very old and that God did have a purpose for her, having seen the tapes, having lived through this experience, what do you think that purpose was?
In some ways, her life was fulfilled at 17 years, because she did, the last poem she wrote, she said, "Who will you give to walk with me through these halls of a tragedy?" And she drew a couple of prophetic pictures about a rose growing up out of a Columbine plant that was dripping with blood. And the verse of scripture that she used said, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man would lay down his life for his friends." And 1 year before she died, she wrote, "This will be my last year, Lord. Thank you for what I've learned."
Darrell Scott. Mr. Scott, thanks for coming in this morning.
Home videotapes made by the killers at Columbine High School. Audio from the tapes has been released for the first time, not from the Sheriff's Department or the media, but from the father of one of the victims. And with it came a plea. Remember his daughter, not her killers. You're about to hear the voices of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, what they were thinking, what they were planning. And we want to warn you, their language is graphic. You might find it offensive. Here's Lynn Cannon.
They showed the why and the how. They were godless. They absolutely hated God.
New evidence of just how troubled Columbine killers Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were, this time from the families of their victims.
My heart doesn't cry out over spilled milk. My heart cries out over spilled blood.
Authorities had known since the day of the killing that the pair had left a carefully planned video diary to speak for them after their suicide attack. But it wasn't until recent weeks that anyone else got to look through this window of hate.
There's a number of things that the world will find out that they don't know yet, including some things that are on these videotapes.
A window opened by the families of 4 victims at a press conference Monday. The families released transcripts of a secret audio recording they made last week when the Sheriff's Department finally allowed them to view the tapes. Convinced the tapes would have been released anyway, these families say they wanted the killer's last words to be released on the family's own terms.
I wanted to be the first person, as someone who loved Rachel Scott with all of my heart, my daughter, I wanted to be the first person to say to the world what was on those tapes.
The portion made public by the 4 families gives more insight as to what motivated the killers and their contempt for their victims. In one portion, Dylan Klebold says, "We're not exactly human. We have human bodies, but we've evolved into one step above you." And they went on, fantasizing that their attack would spark wider violence, with Harris saying, "We need an effing kickstart. We need to get a chain reaction going here." Harris, kissing his sawed-off shotgun, proudly predicts their attack will be like a scene from a favorite video game, saying, "It's gonna be like Doom, man, after the bombs explode straight out of Doom." Then, as if to challenge the protests he knows will follow, he says, "Go ahead and change gun laws. How do you think we got ours?" And in an excerpt played at that press conference, the pair singles out certain students for special abuse, including Rachel Scott, whom they killed in the attack. Rachel's stepfather, Larry Nemo, says it is clear his daughter was targeted because she was a Christian, a fact he says the Sheriff's Department has long denied.
The evidence is just very compelling to us that they knew who she was, they knew what she stood for, they knew she stood for Jesus, and they took care of it that way.
Indeed, Klebold and Harris make a point of mocking Christians. The family's release of their bootleg recording highlights the growing tension between at least some of the victims' families and the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office.
I've never yet had the sheriff come to my home and apologize for any mistakes that were made.
That tension came to a boil last week when the families learned Sheriff John Stone had played the tapes for Time magazine, which published portions of them.
The whole world got to see and hear things before I did.
This week, Rachel Scott's family and others called for the sheriff's resignation.
But I do believe with all my heart that he needs to take a final step and resign from his position.
The sheriff had no comment, but last night a spokesman told NBC, "We sympathize with all the victims and their families and are going to continue to try and do the most professional job that we can in investigating the events of April 20th. For Rachel Scott's family, though, there is a more important lesson.
I've learned that life is very short. Life turns on a dime. We need to celebrate life and enjoy it and to live every day as it is the last.
The controversy over the release of the tapes appears likely to drag on. Parents of some of the victims have gone to court to keep the video portion of these tapes from ever being released. The Sheriff's Department has said the tapes could be part of his final report on the Columbine shootings, expected to be released sometime next month.
All changed the next day. It was a sunny morning, 5th period. Some were studying, some enjoying lunch, and you know what happened. Suddenly, teachers whose job it was to guide young minds were trying to save young lives. Tonight, for the first time on national television, some of those teachers take us back to that day.
the day the lessons would be about courage. Here's Sarah James.
The students that have just been rescued by a SWAT team.
When the madness and confusion began that day last April, 5 science teachers instinctively did what no education course had ever taught them.
I think the adrenaline took over.
Chemistry teacher Teresa Miller was on hall duty when she saw some students rushing toward her.
What did they say? Something to the fact that there were a couple of guys with guns.
We were hearing a stampede of students down the hall.
Bev Williams teaches biology.
And then when I saw Teresa with almost no color in her face, I knew this was serious.
Frank Peterson, chairman of the science department.
And then all of a sudden there was some gunfire, and students basically just hit the floor, hit the deck. And I just remember saying something to the kids, get down, get away from the windows.
Biology teacher Doug Johnson.
Had my kids, or any of the kids in the science department, left that area, they would have walked right out into the gunfire part.
Doug, Bev, Teresa, and Frank have been teaching together since 1983. They know each other as well as they know their own families. Accustomed to taking charge and oblivious to the fact that he was running directly through the line of fire, Frank, the department head, ran to the front office to get help, windows shattering ahead of him as he went. But as soon as he got there, everyone in the vicinity, including Frank, was swept from the building to safety. Instead of feeling relieved, Frank was frustrated.
Did you want to still be inside?
Oh, of course. My friends were in there, and my students were in there, and that was my place. I couldn't get back in, so it was very frustrating.
Now Teresa took control. Running down the halls, she tried to keep stampeding students from trampling each other. As she ushered them to safety, Teresa barked orders. Take cover, lock the door, turn off the lights.
Somebody told us what we needed to do.
He'd been shot twice while trying to get students to safety.
So I opened up my door and waved him on down.
Sanders collapsed into the arms of another teacher, and they set him down on the floor.
He was terribly injured.
Yeah, he was bleeding pretty bad at the time.
Did he say anything?
The things that he said we really couldn't understand at the time, simply because he had been shot and some of the damage had done damage to his mouth.
The bullets, which had entered Sanders' back, had come through the other side. Blood was streaming from his chest. 2 students, one with first aid training, tried to slow the bleeding, using their shirts to apply pressure. But Doug knew that Dave Sanders needed medical attention, and fast.
We had a small whiteboard that we used to leave messages. It was about 1 foot by 2 foot. And so we ended up writing a message on it, and it originally said 1 bleeding, because I didn't want to panic the students. And then as I thought about it and got closer to the window, I remember adding the words to death.
Meanwhile, at the front of the room, Teresa was on the phone with a parent who in turn was talking to 911.
We were administering whatever first aid we could. Real basic things. There wasn't a lot that we could do. Were you exposed? I mean, could they have seen you from the window to the hall? Mm-hmm. Were you worried about that? No. Why not? Dave?
Teresa, Doug, Bev, and Cappy, and more than 200 students and other teachers were so close to danger they could feel the vibration of the bullets, smell the gunpowder, and hear the voices of the killers in the hallway right on the other side of the wall. When the murderous rampage ended, 4 hours after it began, there were 15 dead, 14 students, including the 2 killers, and teacher Dave Sanders, who died in the arms of a SWAT officer in science room number 3. Yet after everything they'd been through, the teachers never had any doubts about returning to Columbine.
I was very anxious to come back after the summer because I know that that's where I want to be. And the people there, the children, the parents, the entire community. That's exactly the profession I feel most comfortable in. It does give you another perspective of who you are in these children's lives. And returning to the school was very, very important to me in that these students would need to have the teachers that were there that experienced it and not some new teachers that wouldn't be able to understand where they were at.
How would you say, Frank, that the students treat each other now?
It's just a school where people, I think, are aware of life and how tentative life can be, and so they need to kind of seize the moment.
On any given day, at any given time, they're doing wonderful. On any given day, at any given time, they're not coping quite so well. It just depends on the instant, the time, the kid. Same thing is true for us.
As part of their healing, the teachers are planning to write a book about the day no one can forget. A book they hope will be a tribute to all teachers.
Are you able to feel proud or good about what you did that day?
I think there's a certain pride in what we did, and there's also a certain frustration in what we couldn't do.
I'd like to believe, and I truly do, that a teacher in a similar situation would have done the same thing. Otherwise, I wouldn't send my children to school every day.
We were doing what we had to do because we're teachers.
20-some teachers from Columbine are putting their recollections in a book with the help of an author and retired Columbine librarian named Mary Swanson. They say it will be a tribute to teachers everywhere. Now let's take a look at some of the schools.
Facts, rumors, and myths were often mixed.
Late word from the local sheriff, there may have been as many as 25 victims.
But 9 months later, police finished their investigation of what really happened. That report is still secret, but enough information and facts are known. For most questions, there are now answers. The Trenchcoat Mafia and the killers, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold.
There were kids that wore black duster coats and black trench coats, but Eric and Dylan were not a part of that group.
And the principal says that yearbook picture was an innocent group of kids posing. Did Harris and Klebold have accomplices?
There's nothing to suggest that these two were acting in concert with anyone else.
Police even say their parents did not know. The district attorney's office saying no charges are planned. Did the shooters purposely target athletes, blacks, Christians?
It was a suicide mission, and whoever stood in the way was going to die.
Police agreed, and in 2 home videos reporters have seen, both boys declare their hatred for everyone. But a father, Darrell Scott, saw other takes the killers made. He's convinced Christians were targeted.
They named my daughter in the videos. They called her a godly Christian, and they used a lot of profanity about that.
And the 2 also used racial slurs before killing the only black victim. Where and how did the killers get their guns? Federal investigators say all 4 weapons, like these, came from the Denver Gun Show. 3 bought by this woman, Robin Anderson, then given legally to Eric Harris. The 4th gun, though, was bought by Mark Maness, then sold to the underage teens. That's illegal, and Maness has been sentenced to 6 years in jail. What about the bombs? There were 90. Most were small rigged CO2 cylinders and carried in the killer's pockets. As for the 2 large propane tank bombs, which did not explode, police believe they brought them to the cafeteria in duffel bags at the time of the siege.
From Eric Harris's family, this. What he did was unforgivable and beyond our capability to understand, which is perhaps the biggest unanswered question about Columbine. What drove 2 young teenagers to want everyone to go through hell, everyone to suffer? A question without an answer. Roger O'Neill, NBC News, Littleton.
We mentioned this earlier. There are accusations tonight that the SWAT team that responded, through a combination of excess confusion or caution or both are understandable, perhaps was not as effective as it could have been. Members of that Littleton SWAT team have spoken for the first time and exclusively to our next guest here on the broadcast tonight. Dave Smith is the Director of Education for the Law Enforcement Television Network, known as LETN. During his 25 years in law enforcement, Mr. Smith was a member of the Arizona State Police SWAT team, and he's been an instructor for about 15 years. He's with us from Littleton tonight. Mr. Smith, first of all, a caveat: it is a whole lot easier to talk about the actions of a SWAT team afterwards than it is to be on a SWAT team at the moment. But having said that, what about this accusation? They spent too much time setting up a perimeter and not enough time or effort going in to get at the source of the firing.
Well, Brian, you know, you're dealing with a situation here that was very dynamic when patrol was initially responding. You had a situation where you had an active shooter, as we talk about in law enforcement, the active shooter situation. As the tactical teams began to arrive, and you got to remember, when the call went out for general assistance, many of the officers initially responding were in fact tactical officers who had equipment and actually threw together, as you see right here, an ad hoc team from multiple agencies. Now, what happened here is a unique problem that has really changed the way law enforcement looks at these situations. I'm not going to tell you
that it was handled perfectly, because it absolutely wasn't. In fact, it's changed. It's a paradigm shift for law enforcement. We had never dealt with a situation like this. These two young men expended so much psychic energy designing such a deadly situation here, and it changed so dramatically from an active shooter to what instantly became a hostage situation. At the same time, law enforcement is being deluged with multiple calls. I mean, it's just such an intense amount of information. It couldn't be processed. You can't really say the SWAT team didn't respond, because there were so many SWAT teams, and the officers did the best they could. This morning I talked to some of the men who formed that initial ad hoc team that used the fire truck to make their approach. One of them had been advised of, they'd been advised there might be snipers on the roof. One of them exposed himself specifically in a position where he could cover the roof, knowing full well that he was completely exposed to anybody shooting through the windows. And yet he made that commitment. He later was to rescue 3 of his cousins from that building. So this was an incredibly intense emotional issue for these people. They wanted to get in here. At the same time, their training, their preparation had always designed a response that if it went from an active shooter to a hostage situation, you don't aggravate a hostage situation and trigger the homicide of those hostages. And when they approached that building, they were seeing kids throughout the building with their hands on the windows in a posture that one might make people who are prisoners do, you know, assuming the position, so to speak, against the windows. So in their minds, there was this tremendous ambiguity. Did they have, in fact, a hostage situation? They were getting incredible amount of calls, not just legitimate calls and information from inside the school, but incredibly people calling with false information throughout the incident. At the same time, the cell phones were so abundant in the calls that they could no longer, communications no longer work. And the problem you have of multiple agencies in an unincorporated area where they couldn't talk to each other. Even units from the large urban area from the same agency often couldn't talk to each other because they were from different sectors and their radios were on different frequencies. So what you had is an incredibly chaotic situation that miraculously they were able to develop a coherent response, often based solely on the creativity and courage of the individual officers forming ad hoc teams and going in to recover wounded students. And as you see here, try to find safe pockets to keep these kids. This is something that is, again, shifted our paradigm. I was, at first blush watching this happen, I myself was very critical of what's the time frame, what's taking so long. And as a SWAT officer, of course, I'd been trained to be prepared.
Dave Smith.
And this is shift us forever.
We want to remind our audience, Dave has been giving us the benefit of this exclusive information he's received through these various SWAT team members in his interviews. Dave's with LATN. We sure thank you for coming by on the...
In the Columbine shooting. And here with us is Daryl Scott, father of one of the 12 students who was killed. His daughter, Rachel, died 2 years ago at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. Daryl is co-author of a new book called Chain Reaction. It's based on an essay written by Rachel just a month before the shooting. And thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
The book came about, as I understand it, after you actually found a piece of loose paper when you were going through some things. What did it say? What prompted you to write this book?
Well, my daughter Bethany and I were in Rachel's bedroom just looking at some of her things and remembering her. And I looked under the bed, saw these 2 pieces of paper stuck on a mattress spring. And I pulled them out, and it was a 5th period class essay that she wrote 1 month before she was killed. And it said, the title was My Ethics, My Code of Life. And in it, she said she dared to believe that she could start a compassionate revolution through acts of kindness. And she challenged her readers. She said, well, you can start a chain reaction through acts of kindness.
Let me read exactly what she said. This is the passage that you quote in your book. I have this theory, and this is Rachel writing, that if one person can go out of their way to show compassion, then it will start a chain reaction of the same. People will never know how far a little kindness can go. How do you believe that you can take this thought that Rachel put down on paper and translate it into something larger?
Well, over the last 2 years, my wife and I have traveled across the country in over 250 cities, and we've spoken to over 1 million people live, not counting the media outlets. And we've spoken in inner city high schools, we've spoken in colleges, and we use video and audio as well as some of Rachel's writings. And we really see an impact on young people's lives. I think deep down, most young people are seeking for security and significance during their teen years. And when they hear the story of someone who was self-confident, who was popular at school, but who chose to reach out to those that weren't being reached out to, something rises up in them and they do respond. And we see a lot of change take place in schools.
At about the same time Rachel wrote that statement, there was a videotape made of one of the shooters, Eric Klebold. one of the things he said was this. I'm sorry, Eric Harris. We need a kickstart. We need to get a chain reaction going here. It's going to be like Doom, which is the video game. After the bombs explode, that shotgun straight out of Doom. What an eerie sense of timing that is, that both of them would use that phrase, chain reaction. What do you make of that?
When I listened to that video that Eric had made, I had goosebumps because it was the same time that my daughter was writing the essay. Both of them said that in March of 1999. And I just want to say something for all the listeners out there. I woke up this morning. This is a hard day and will always be a hard day for all of the victims' families. And I was thinking about the fact that all of America knows the names of Eric and Dylan, but we so easily forget the victims' names. I just want to say something on behalf of the victims. Lauren, Matthew, John, and Corey, Kelly, Daniel, Dave, and Kyle, you will never be forgotten. Through our tears, you'll see our smile. Isaiah, Rachel, Cassie, Stephen, Daniel, all of you remain in our hearts and in our memories. You will not die in vain.
Today there was a shooting in Louisiana, and you said when you heard about it, it sent chills down your spine. And you also just said that all of those teenagers will not die in vain. Has anything changed? Do you feel that a difference is being made, and what still needs to happen?
I think there has been a positive change in this sense. The focal point after Columbine was primarily just gun control and just metal detectors and just the surface. And I don't want to take that lightly. Danny Mauser's dad has done a terrific job in Colorado and has poured his life into something that has been meaningful for his son. We've poured our lives into something that's meaningful for our daughter, which is to also look at another aspect that we have to look at, and that's not just the guns and not just the metal detectors, not just the weapons of destruction, but also the influences on the hearts of these young men that caused them to do what they did. And our focal point has been influence. What can we do to change the influences? And our president said after these last California shootings that we need to look deeper and we need to look at the influences, the moral values that we've removed from our schools somewhat, and take a second look at what we're using to influence young people with.
I want to talk to you some more about this because you have talked to 1 million people over the last 2 years, and I know that you have given this so much thought. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and continue this discussion. We'll be back with Daryl Scott in just a moment. And we're back talking with Daryl Scott, whose daughter Rachel was killed at the shooting at Columbine High School. He's written this new book. It's called Chain Reaction. It was based on some thoughts that she had put down on paper just a month before she died. And you were talking about influence before we went to a break, and so many parents out there looking for answers, witnessed by the fact that 1 million people have come to hear you speak in the last 2 years. What have you learned through your hard experience?
Well, one thing I've learned is that this is not a simple solution. It's a complex issue. But it involves the whole community. The media really has to be responsible for the influences that they project to young people. The internet has to be responsible for the influences that it makes available. Parents have to be more responsible to spend time with their children and to also be aware of what's going on. The Bernal family is a good example of parents that were involved with their daughter. They took the time.
Mom and Dad.
Cassie's mom and dad took the time when they found out that she was struggling with some issues to really zero in on that, and I admire them for what they did. I wish that had happened with Eric and Dylan, that someone had taken the time to look in the basement of that home and see what was there.
Of course, in addition to losing Rachel, your son Craig and was huddled under a table in the cafeteria at the same time. Friends of his were shot. He heard the shots ring out that killed Rachel, and many of us remember the very moving tribute he made to his sister on the Today Show. How's he doing, and how's the family doing?
Craig had a really rough year after Columbine, and that's understandable because he saw so much death and so many horrible things take place, and then he lost his sister. But he's doing well. The last year, he's just done tremendous. He's a leader in his youth group, and he's involved, in his school, and we're real proud of Craig.
And if you could say one thing to parents out there who are watching, what would it be?
Let my daughter's words be a challenge to every one of us, not just the young people, because we can, every one of us, start a chain reaction. We have opportunities every day to make a difference in people's lives. And don't overlook the small things and look into the big things.
simple acts of kindness, the things that Rachel talked about when she wrote that essay. The book is called Chain Reaction, A Call to Compassionate Revolution. It's already in its second printing. It's not even supposed to be out yet, so people should be able to find it in their bookstores. Daryl Scott, it is an honor to sit here and talk to you, and best of luck to you, and my best to your family.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll be right back.
Headlines. Rachel Scott was one of the 13 killed 2 years ago in the tragic shooting at Columbine High School. Her father has compiled some of her most poignant thoughts in a new book, Chain Reaction, A Call to Compassionate Revolution. Joining us is Rachel's father, Daryl Scott. Our thoughts, our sympathies, our hopes, our prayers with you on the second anniversary. Thank you for being here tonight to talk about it. And let's talk about the phrase chain reaction, because that phrase was also used by the person who tragically killed your daughter. What does that phrase mean?
Well, about 2 weeks after Rachel was killed, her older sister Bethany and I were in her bedroom, and I saw a piece of paper caught underneath her bed springs. And I pulled it out, and it was an article she had written in a fifth period class about a month before she was killed. And in the article, she said, I dare to believe that if one person can go out of their way to show compassion, they can start a chain reaction. And she ended the article by challenging a reader to start a chain reaction. And several months later, I listened to the one who killed her say the same words. He looked at the camera, and ironically, this happened in March of '99 for both of them.
And that got things thinking in your mind about how to take the memory of your daughter and help that to live on. So
well, actually, what happened is we received a lot of emails and letters, and we began to find out that Rachel, for 2 years in her school, had chosen to reach out to certain kids that weren't being reached out to. She reached out to those that were handicapped. She reached out to kids that were picked on, and she reached out to the ones new at her school.
I've read stories about how she would walk up to a new girl, for example, who was sitting by herself in the cafeteria, bring over a couple of girlfriends and make her feel at home. And
that's right.
Other kids don't often do things like that. She seemed to have a consciousness and an awareness that often high school kids don't have.
Well, I think in high school you're looking for the two greatest needs of the human heart, significance and security. And we struggle with identity. Rachel found her identity, and she was secure in what she did. So she found a lot of pleasure in reaching out to people.
How do you take that consciousness and how do you transfer that and teach that to others?
Well, we're putting together a high school program, and I go into inner city schools, colleges. We've spoken to a lot of people over the last 2 years, and we've seen a lot of kids that don't have compassion because they've never been exposed to some of the principles. We share Rachel's story, and we see some lives change. We've actually seen 6 Eric and Dylans turned around.
How?
We share with them an emotional, powerful story. We use video, audio, and then speaking from the heart.
What is it, the crux? What is it they see that turns their lives around?
I think they see that the end result of cruelty and bullying, and the fact that it's cool to be kind. I mean, that's our message, that there's nothing wrong. Sometimes we need a revolution, and kindness in schools today is a revolution.
And that was something that your daughter talked about, didn't she?
She talked about it, wrote about it, and practiced it.
Let's talk about bullying, because that happens a lot in schools. It's not often addressed. Guidance counselors, principals, teachers, it seems to happen all the time, but rarely is it talked about.
Well, you know, amazingly, when you and I were in school, there was bullying. There's probably always going to be a certain element of that. But I think one of the things we need to really look at, I spoke before a House Judiciary Committee shortly after Columbine, and the whole nation was focused on gun control at that point. And what I was trying to say is we need to look deeper. We need to look at hard issues. And I believe the influences that are out there where our kids are concerned are very important. And one of those influences we've removed is a lot of moral values in our school.
You know, you've said a number of things, Mr. Scott. Good to see you. I spoke with you earlier, and as a father, I can't imagine the pain of losing a daughter like that, and our thoughts and prayers are always going to be with you. And you took a courageous stand at that time. You said you're not going to go along with the intellectually lazy argument, the knee-jerk reaction that it's the gun, and then you took it a step further, and you had the courage to talk about moral values, the decline in society. I agreed with you on both those things. You want to expand that?
Well, Sean, I'm for anything that prevents violence. I don't care what it is. I mean, I'm not out on an issue. I just want to see the violence stopped. But I realized it wasn't the instrument of death that was the problem. It was the finger that pulls the trigger, and it was the heart that caused the finger to pull the trigger, and it was the influences on that heart. And one of the things that I address quite often is the fact that we have so misunderstood the First Amendment that we've actually removed the freedom of speech in certain areas which have to do with morals and moral values.
You know, Walter Williams reminded me of something I used to speak about quite often. The 40s and 50s in America, you still had plenty of guns around. Top problems in school, talking in class, chewing gum, and running in the halls, and that shifted to pregnancy, suicide, shootings, and drug abuse. So clearly there's been a cultural shift that has taken place at a time, I guess you might argue, that maybe prayer was taken out of school.
Well, when I went to school, we took guns to school to go squirrel hunting. I'm a redneck from Louisiana, and we'd go squirrel hunting after school. But we also had the freedom to have Bibles in our school. We had the freedom, the 10 Commandments were hanging there telling us not to kill each other.
Sure, and that's all been changed. I want to ask you one thing, because there was this other girl that had gotten a lot of press, Cassie Burnell. She had stood up when asked if you believe in God. Your daughter did the same thing.
Rachel was the first one to be killed. She was outside the school, and at first her story didn't come out.
About 5 seconds.
The young
let you wrap up.
So yes, she said.
As he had already shot her 3 times and said, "Do you still believe in God?"
That's right. She said, "You know I do," because she had shared her faith.
And then he killed her execution style.
That's right.
Mr. Scott, thank you for being with us on this day. We thank you for you and we pray for you and your family. Thank you. We'll be right back. Stay with us on Hannity.
Years have passed since the Columbine massacre. The father of one of the victims will tell us how he's carrying on his daughter's legacy. That's straight ahead.
It shows what an incredible youth we have in this country when you see the reactions of the kids who hadn't snapped, and if those kids came out of it better people than down. There's certain kinds of music that lift you, that make you, and you know, it doesn't require death, or it doesn't require some sort of horrific event to happen in your life, especially when you're a teenager or when you're young, when you're a kid, to affect you profoundly, you know. And I know that music was a way that I could find release always, and certain people's music more than other people's, and if we can do that, be that for somebody in a time of trouble, then that'd be a whole reason to keep doing it, you know.
My name is Sarah. I'm 19 years old. I'm from Littleton, Colorado, and I am a huge fan of the Dave Matthews Band. There's 2 kinds of fans with the Dave Matthews Band, at least that I've seen. The ones that get totally into the music, totally into the lyrics, and they get into everything. They follow Dave around the country. The second kind of Dave fan is the TV boppers and like frat boys. They're the ones who scream, "I love you, Dave," in hopes that he might hear them. I am a fan, more so on an emotional level. I was a student at Columbine High School. I was actually out to lunch when the shooting happened on April 20th, 1999. I was 17 when the shooting happened. I was a junior at Columbine. I lost 3 really good friends, Dan Mauser, Rachel Scott, and Stephen Curnow. Before the shooting happened, I was a fan of Dave, but I wouldn't say a complete fanatic. I had all the CDs and I would listen to them, but it wasn't until after the shooting that I really got into the music, because it's all about celebrating life.
When you see horrible things like Columbine, it shows what an incredible youth we have in this country when you see the reactions of the kids who hadn't snapped, and that those kids knew how to look after each other and how to defend each other, and that they came out of it better people than went into it.
The weekend before the shooting happened, I had just gone to prom, and a big group of us went, and Rachel Scott was one of the people in our group. I just remember being in the limo with Rachel, and we were all listening to Dave. Her favorite song was Crush, and so we listened to that song over and over again.
Crazy how you make it all alright, crush me.
At Rachel's funeral, friends and family were allowed to write on her casket. I don't remember what exactly I wrote to her, but I do remember writing a Dave quote as my last words to her. It's from the song 2 Steps. Celebrate we will, because life is short but sweet for certain. And somehow it just kind of came to me. I thought it would pertain to the tragedy. I thought it pertained to Rachel and how she lived her life. The music of Dave Matthews has really helped me cope with this tragedy, just because It talks about like living life to its fullest and, you know, living each day.
The one thing that we've done when we're born is, other than being born, is that we've died. And so I sing about that a lot, that, you know, we're all going to die, but might as well fill our time here trying to do something right.
Floyd Tinsley is the violinist for the Dave Matthews Band. He's kind of involved in the whole Columbine story as well. He decided to donate $50,000 to the library fund. And I don't know how he decided or why he decided to do that.
I just wanted to do something for the kids at Columbine to say, hey, I'm here and we're here, and we're thinking about you.
My favorite Dave Matthews song is number 41. The lyrics really hit home. I sometimes feel like the song was written for me and about me. This is the back of my senior yearbook, and every senior was allowed to choose a quote that best suited them, and I chose the Dave Matthews Band quote. It's right here, and it says, "I will go in this way and find my own way out. I'm only this far, and only tomorrow leads my way." The band because of the lyrics and because of the music. I love the long jams that they do, and the lyrics just hit home for me. Just somehow I can relate people in my life or events in my life to the music.
There's always like some sort of connection with a song or with a tour, a show, or something, and it's amazing to me that we have that much effect on people.
Currently, I've been to 4 Dave Matthews Band concerts, one in '98, one in '99, one in 2000. I misplaced my ticket for the Sandstone show. I have no idea where it is. Right now, I'm preparing for my 5th concert, which is going to be held at Folsom Field in Boulder. A ritual for me the day of a concert is having my friend over, and we just blast Dave while getting ready.
Is this your concert?
Yes.
Seriously? Dave. It's such a Dave version. It's not even funny. I know.
We kind of play a guessing game on what songs we hope will be played or what songs we will think will be played. And so I'm crossing my fingers for number 41 and Two-Step. Those are my 2 songs that I really want to hear. And then Christine, she's crossing her fingers for Crush because that's her favorite song. And we both kind of want that song too because that reminds us of prom and of Rachel.
Crush me. Camera quickly, so quickly.
I had the opportunity to go backstage and meet Dave. One of the producers pulled my friend Christine out of the car, and I thought, they're just going to film her. Christine jumps into my car, and there's the camera guy and the sound guy and the producer right there, and they're all like leaning into my car as much as possible.
So Sarah, I'm supposed to let you know that we're taking you to meet Dave right now. No, you are so lying to me. No, I'm not. Get out of the car. What? Okay, just keep breathing. You can do this.
Most people get to meet him after the concert, but there's a group of people there, so it's just going to be me and Dave. Walking backstage, I was like, oh, I stick out like a sore thumb, man, because I have the Dave Matthews Band shirt on, and I'm just like walking around like all big-eyed, like looking at all the roadies and everything that's going on backstage, and everybody that's, you know, supposed to be there are kind of like looking at me because I'm like walking around going, gosh. I was scared that I was going to make a fool out of myself or say something wrong, or, you know, I was nervous going backstage.
How are you? I see you're behaving all cool.
I was told to act all cool.
You were?
Meeting Dave in person was a very interesting thing because he's more of a normal guy than I think people, you know, you see him on posters, you see him on a cover of an album, you know, but he's just like, you know, a normal guy.
You won a prize to come and meet mundane me. And you wrote,
I think this is my prize. I started crying because my frustration and happiness of being there just like start coming out. I've been wanting to like tell you, or like I met Boyd in like 2000 at Kansas and stuff, and I've been wanting to tell you guys like my writing the quote on Rachel's casket from Two-Step. And I don't think I really made one complete full sentence. I think things were coming out in like fragments and from all over the place, not one even complete thought really. I remember we went to prom like the week before it happened, and Rachel was in the car with us and everything, and we were like listening to the music and stuff like that, and like we listened to that song, and we listened to Crush, and we listened to all that songs, and it was just like, sorry, like I shouldn't be.
That's okay, we could turn the cameras on.
Dave just keeps like hugging me because I think he thought maybe I needed comfort, and that was the only way that he could give me any comfort.
When they turn the cameras off, that's when we'll have our time.
I did not know that Dave had added the song Two Step to the set list for me. When I was backstage, he went over a few songs that he was going to play, like Bartender and some of the new songs, and then he said, and we're going to play Two Step for you. And I thought the collective, like, Boulder concert goers, not for me. It just meant so much more to hear it after, you know, after telling Dave my story. So that's when I really understood that the song, you know, was added for me and for Rachel that night. So it was that much more special. Dave wanted to speak to me without the cameras and everybody around, so I gave him my phone number. Fast forward to the next morning, I am getting ready for work, and the phone rings, and Dave's like, "Hi, this is Dave. We met the night before," and I was like, well, yeah, I would forget that I met Dave Matthews the night before. And he says, "I have to be honest with you, sir. I was kind of nervous playing last night because I knew you were out there and listening to the concert." And I'm thinking the whole time, Dave Matthews was nervous because I was out in an audience of like 50,000 people. I thanked him for everything that he had done, allowing me to see him, but I also thanked him for everything that he had unknowingly done, you know, like how the music helped me get through the tragedy. The Columbine shooting has just taught me so much. It's taught me an appreciation for life and a more sense of myself, more sense of other people's feelings. I think that quote, "Celebrate we will because life is short but sweet for certain," definitely pertains to my life now, not necessarily before the tragedy, because I didn't understand my own mortality at that point in time. I really think that the Dave Matthews Band as a whole should be a role model, just because, you know, what they sing about, the whole issue of appreciating life and living life to its fullest, you know, it makes you just appreciate everything.
Over what authorities in that small town did today. They released a videotape you're about to see taken by the fire department in the hours after the massacre at the high school. The department insists it's a training tape, but it's graphic. Parts of it are oddly set to music, and the most outrageous to some, it's now available for sale to the public. NBC News correspondent Chip Reed is in Colorado tonight.
Scenes from inside Columbine High School, the chaos a clear sign of the terror that reigned on the afternoon of April 20th, 1999. For the first time, the carnage inside the school library, where 10 students were murdered and the 2 gunmen took their own lives. The video presentation put together by the Littleton Fire Department. In the background, music intended as a tribute to the victims, an effort to be sensitive. But parents of Columbine victims are outraged, saying it has exactly the opposite effect, and comparing it to a warped and gory music video.
There isn't anything that could be benefited by people watching this except unless for some reason they have some sense of morbidness for violence.
I think it would be ludicrous to say that every piece of evidence or information given to a victim's family then has to be made public.
The parents are also incensed that the video is being sold to the public by the county government for $25 apiece. The county says that's simply the cost of copying and distributing the tape. The fire department today defended the video, claiming that after the Columbine massacre, they were flooded with requests to share their experiences with other fire departments. In a press release, the fire chief said, quote, "The purpose of the instructional presentations was to provide more detailed information about the incident and to motivate public safety officials to increase the level of cooperation between agencies." And the fire department says the videotape worked, that after presenting it at conferences across the country, they received dozens of letters of thanks. The fire department also says that it, quote, feels strongly that out of respect for the victims and their families, the tape is not suitable for public viewing. Then why is it being released and sold to the public? Well, that decision was made by the county attorney, who says that when a judge ruled earlier this week that the tape had to be released to the victims' families, he had no choice under Colorado law but to release it to the public. Chip Reed, NBC News, Golden.
Columbine High School, shortly after 2 students opened fire last spring, killing 12 classmates, a teacher, and themselves. What we're not showing you are the more graphic scenes from the bloody massacre in the library. Useful for training, helpful to the investigation, even necessary to the family's lawsuit against the sheriff's office. But for sale to the public?
The timing of it is very interesting, that most of the families haven't even had a chance to see it, and they put it up for sale.
We're frankly very afraid that many of the victims' families and children who were wounded are going to see this video for the first time on television tonight.
And it's not just the pictures that some consider tasteless. It's the music and the lyrics.
Maybe it's the KKK and the skinheads. Maybe it's the communists. Maybe it's the Catholics.
In a statement, the county attorney says he chose to release the tapes to avoid further lawsuits because the judge said that even though it's disturbing, there is no compelling reason why it should not be made public. For the victims' families, today's release opens a wound that had just begun to heal.
First time today, I saw my daughter being drugged over to the fire engine. I didn't need to see that, and nobody else needs to see that.
But soon, many more people will.
Just kind of a dark website, you could call it.
Meanwhile, the funerals continue. Mourners saying goodbyes to 3 more students, including Matthew Kechter. But yesterday, there was finally some reason for celebration in Littleton. Prom queen Valine Schnur, who suffered at least 9 bullet and shrapnel wounds, came home from the hospital. She went home with 4 bullets still remaining in her body. And at nearby Chatfield High School, officials prepare for the arrival of the Columbine kids, who begin classes on Thursday. Principal Sally Blanchard says security will be beefed up.
We have been limiting access to our school to only those who have business here.
Finally today at 11:21 a.m., exactly 1 week from the start of Eric Harris's and Dylan Klebold's rampage, there was a touching moment of silence to mark the tragic anniversary. Even local TV went off the air.
Meantime, Inside Edition has determined where the shooters purchased some of their bomb-making materials. Workers at the Hugh M. Woods Lumber and Building Materials Company, a local lumber yard in Littleton, confirmed that they sold Harris and Klebold propane tanks, duct tape, and nails. A semi-automatic pistol, an assault rifle, sawed-off shotguns. What on earth were high school seniors doing with these kinds of weapons? And how in the world could they have gotten them? For someone intent on getting a gun, it's really not that difficult.
It is criminal how easy it is for children in America to obtain guns.
Access to the guns is one of the major outstanding questions for investigators. Just how did the shooters amass their arsenal? Well, across the country, legal access to weapons is widespread.
Welcome to the Gun and Knife Show.
Gun shows like this one, held 5 years ago, are places where anyone can buy weapons. Naomi Pace is the communications director of Handgun Control. That's the gun control organization founded by Sarah Brady in the wake of the shooting of her husband, former Reagan press secretary James Brady.
Anyone who walks into a gun show, and that unfortunately includes criminals, can buy any kind of firearm they could possibly want.
It was a gun show where, according to published reports, Dylan Klebold's girlfriend, Robin Anderson, bought firearms used in the massacre. Prosecutors said the weapons, including 2 shotguns and 1 rifle, may have been purchased legally.
It's not at all surprising that the guns from the Littleton shooting are alleged to have come from gun shows.
Anderson, who's cooperating with investigators, was questioned by police Monday and released. She's being called a witness, not a suspect. But Jefferson County Sheriff John Stone said it was possible that Anderson knew how the shooters planned to use those weapons, saying, quote, "She's not going to use those for pheasant hunting." 1 week after the deadly school shooting, the National Rifle Association still plans to hold its scheduled convention in Denver. That's led residents to take out an ad asking the NRA to take its business elsewhere.
However, the NRA has said it will reduce the length of their meeting to show respect and sympathy for the families and for the community. The meeting has now been scaled down from original 3 days in length to just 1. You know, up until now, our image of the shooters in the Columbine massacre has pretty much been limited to those grainy yearbook photos. But the boys had a run-in with the law. And with the release of an audio tape, we now have a more complete picture of Eric Harris. Craig Rivera reports.
You've seen their sinister faces. Now listen closely. For the first time, you're about to hear the voices of cold-blooded killers Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. After a run-in with the law, they were being questioned by a Colorado judge.
Where did you go to school?
Columbine High School.
And what grade are you in?
I'm a junior.
Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold stood before Magistrate John DeVita in January 1998 after being charged with theft.
What grade did you get?
C- or C+ behind average.
Harris's voice gives no indication of his troubled soul. He stood before a judge after he and Dylan Klebold were caught stealing electronic equipment like this from a van.
Now, this was the first time you went out and engaged in this kind of activity, isn't it?
That's right.
Well, I don't want to believe that.
Dylan's father, Thomas, is also heard for the first time, speaking on behalf of his son.
This has been a rather traumatic experience, I think. It's probably a good thing that's a good experience that he did get caught the first time, and as far as I can tell, this was the first time.
He'd tell you if there were any more?
Yes, he would, actually.
Means you get a good relationship.
Yes, sir.
Both men agree to participate in what's called a diversion program. It would be an opportunity for the duo to have their criminal slates wiped clean. There's an apparent irony to this story. As part of their so-called rehabilitation, Harris and Klebold did community service. It is reported that part of that work included cleaning up behind sports jocks at this community center. Reports say they'd clean bathrooms, vacuum, sweep floors, pick up trash. The twist, of course, is that it's become widely known that the killers hated jocks. David Kitchoff manages the facility and supervised Harris and Klebold.
Eric indicated to Dylan that it really wasn't a bad place to work, and they seemed pretty comfortable here.
The bloodbath at Columbine High happened 2 months after the pair successfully completed the community service program and were given glowing reports.
And we'll have more on Harris and Klebold's history with the criminal justice system tomorrow in Inside Edition.
Still to come on Inside Edition. The faces of the fallen. Now their last moments on Earth, victim by victim. They're your favorite.
It's sad to imagine what might have been if Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold had put their efforts towards something good. Steve Gendell now with a minute-by-minute account of the machine-like precision with which they carried out their deadly mission.
6:15 a.m. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold begin their day with their usual Tuesday morning bowling class. In keeping with their Nazi obsessions, they shout "Sieg Heil" whenever they make strikes or spares. Only these two know that bodies will soon be falling. His name is Brooks Brown, and on this day, he's the only person to experience compassion from Eric Harris. Brooks is smoking a cigarette outside school when Harris tells him, quote, "Brooks, I like you. Get out of here. Go home." Brooks is puzzled by the warning, but not for long. 11 a.m. Klebold and Harris approach the school dressed in their trademark black trench coats. One of them throws a pack of firecrackers toward the entrance. So far, it looks like a dumb prank. Then one of them pulls out a semi-automatic rifle and fires. Rachel Scott was a beautiful 17-year-old, an aspiring playwright with everything to live for. A bullet strikes her in the head. Even then, one eyewitness thinks it's a prank, that Rachel has been hit by a paintball. But it's no prank. She's dead, and the carnage has begun. Moments later, 15-year-old Danny Rohrbaugh is shot dead just outside the school's entrance. 2 other students are wounded before the duo enters the school. 11:15 a.m. A policeman's son hiding in a storage room phones the police to report the shooting. He can hear the killers pounding on the door and even the sound of their guns being loaded. Certain he is doomed, the student tells the man on the phone, quote, please tell my father I love him. The worst is yet to come. Klebold and Harris burst into the cafeteria, filled with 500 students. They open fire and hurl pipe bombs. And in a blur of smoke and bullets, one man comes to the rescue. Everybody knew teacher Dave Sanders was a good guy, but who could have suspected he was a hero waiting to happen? The popular father of three helps clear the cafeteria, then runs to the second floor in search of more students. Suddenly, he's shot numerous times and crawls to a classroom. Student Aaron Hansen.
We were asking him about his family, and he was telling us a few things, and we were talking to him to keep him awake. We didn't want him to go unconscious.
What are you doing in this library? On the floor! You better stay on the floor! Is there any way you can lock the doors? Smoke is coming in from out there, and I'm looking. Okay. The gun is right outside the library door, okay? I don't think I'm gonna go out there, okay? You at home, I got 3 kills, okay? What on it, okay?
The killers move into the library. One reportedly yells, quote, "All the jocks stand up. We're going to kill every single one of you." They saunter through the library, laughing and hooting as they shoot 10 students dead, including this one. "Do you believe in God?" one killer asks born-again Christian Cassie Bernal. "Yes, I believe in God," she replies. "Why?" the killer asks. Before she can reply, he ends her life. Bree Pasquale was in the library and somehow survived.
Everyone around me got shot, and I begged him for 10 minutes not to shoot me.
Fast thinking saved Craig Scott, whose sister Rachel was the first to die. Craig was drenched with the blood of his friend, Isaiah Scholes.
I just laid there. Isaiah's blood was all around me, and so I just laid there and pretended to be dead.
Absolute madness. Terrified students barricade themselves wherever they happen to be, wondering if help will ever get inside to save them. 12:30 p.m. SWAT team enters the school from the east and west sides, well aware that the killers could be anywhere. 2:30 p.m. Rescuers at last begin freeing groups of students. Dressed in black, the rescuers resemble the killers. For a heart-stopping instant, the students they're saving believe the good guys are actually the bad guys. And there is this unforgettable image of 17-year-old Patrick Ireland. Wounded in the head, he manages a desperate bid for freedom.
We said, "You're going to be okay. You can do this. Come on, come on."
3 p.m. Dave Sanders' fight for life comes to an end. He succumbs to his wounds, but not before saying, quote, "I'm not going to make it. Tell my girls I love them." Chaos, confusion. Nearly 2,000 students are fleeing. And the question is, could the killers be among them? They're told to keep their hands up so police can check for weapons. It seems as if the siege will never end, but at last it does. 4:30 p.m. Police enter the library, and it's a scene beyond horror. A dozen students lie dead on the floor, one still clutching a pencil. Police can barely believe what they see. And right in the midst of the innocent dead lie Klebold and Harris, who apparently saved themselves for last. The library is silent, save for the hum of computers. And it is a message allegedly written by Harris in his computer profile that might have foretold this tragedy. The message, quote, "Kill 'em."
Should be a safe place.
The bodies of as many as 16 people are still here at Columbine High School, victims of the worst school shooting in American history. I'll never forget Michael Scholes, who had lost his son, Isaiah, and a young man named Craig Scott, who had lost his sister, sat down with me.
All these people that I was praying for, 30 minutes later, their brothers and sisters were showing up.
But not your sister. It was one of the most profound and even spiritual experiences I've ever had.
Scott, and I was a survivor of the Columbine High School shooting.
Okay, this is a couple of dozen more students that are running out of the school, and
I was underneath a table, and the two shooters came into the library, immediately shooting off their guns. And they came over and they saw my friend Isaiah, who was one of the few black students at our school, and they shot and killed Isaiah. And I also lost my sister, Rachel Joy Scott. Rachel was 17 years old when she was killed. The next day after the shooting, I got a call from the Today Show They told me that Isaiah's father was going to be on the show. That's why I went on for the Day Show, because I wanted to be able to hug Isaiah's dad. Just because I spent the last few minutes with his son. Because I made it out, and I got home, and I got to see my mom. I got to see my dad that night. And Isaiah didn't. There was a moment during the interview where Michael Scholes reached out and grabbed my hand. He told me to, I think it was one of those moments that gave people hope, because here was two people that had lost loved ones and didn't know each other, but that were bonding. I loved her a lot.
How are your parents doing, Craig?
And I felt like Katie Couric genuinely was in the moment with us and cared. I could feel her genuineness. I knew something wasn't right. I think being on the Today Show really was the start of me beginning to share what I went through, and that has helped me to heal so much.
To this day, it's one of the most moving things I've ever seen. Never forget it. I really won't.
All those stories really, okay, inspiring.
And that's just a handful of what you've seen.
Everybody. Before the commercial break, 6 people who have inspired me so much. Of course, we're talking about Tricia Miley, Orly Brown, Jack and Patsy Clausine. We just went over that. And of course, Lauren Manning and Craig Scott. You know, this has been so special for me to get a chance to salute you all, because I can't tell you how moved I've been by each of your stories and by your courage and determination and strength and moxie and pluck and generosity and kindness. And as a result, I wanted to salute you and leave you all with a gift. It's one of my favorite songs. It's from the musical Wicked, and I really think it speaks to everyone about the things that you all have been through and the changes we all go through in life. And Idina Menzel, who's from the original cast of Wicked, will sing it with Trisha Yearwood. So it's a real treat. So, and I'm dedicating this song to all of you. So, ladies and gentlemen, Idina Menzel and Trisha Yearwood, who's coming with me.